Hello and welcome to today's tutorial on using graphics in Simple GIS Client, which is our desktop GIS mapping application produced by Simple GIS software. To begin with, it's probably useful to have a brief overview of what graphics or simple graphics are versus the normal layer files that you would load into your map project. So typically, as you would add data to your map, you would use the Add Data tool button here located in the upper left corner, which would allow you to select what type of data you're wanting to add. And this data is always stored in an external data format, so it could be a shapefile, it could be a geopackage database, it could be raster imagery. The point is, the data itself is stored in an external file that you're just referencing in your project. And as you're adding this data, it comes in as a separate layer in your table of contents here on the left side of your map. Now, as you can see in this particular map, I have many layers loaded. Really, it's part of the Street Atlas data set that I have loaded currently into my project. And any layer that's loaded, you can actually turn that layer on and off by just simply clicking its checkbox next to the layer name. In addition, layers have legends assigned to them that indicates how to visualize the individual features that are contained in that layer. Now, unlike these layers, graphics are simply stored as virtual objects in your project. So they're not stored in an external data file like a vector layer is, like a shapefile, for example, but rather it is saved within the project itself. In addition, graphics don't have an assigned legend. Each graphic has its own symbol that is saved with the graphic object in your project. And then also, graphics do not have attribute fields, so you can't query graphics like you can a vector layer, for instance, like a shapefile where you could run a query to only select certain features. And graphics also can't be used in some of the advanced analysis tools like these layers can. For that reason, graphics are great for annotation on a map to call attention to features, but it's not what you would want to use to do any type of detailed analysis. So it's best probably just to begin to start demonstrating some of the graphic tools. And I'll begin by just drawing some simple graphics on the map itself. So to begin drawing graphics on your map, there is a set of tools. It's on the second tool button row. Right about in the middle of the tool button row, there's a drop-down arrow. And if you click on this arrow, you'll see there's a set of tools here for drawing a point, line, polyline, rectangle, polygon, etc. So to begin to draw a point, I can just simply click on this tool button and click on the map where I want to add the point. And it'll actually place that point object, as I can see here. And as I continue to click on the map, it will continue to add point objects. Conversely, if I came and I selected to draw a polyline, if I clicked on this tool operates as I click, it begins the line. And as I move my mouse, you see I get this rubber band feature. And I can click again to add a vertex. And I can continue to just click. And then when I'm finishing the line, I just double click to end it. And so that's how you would add these graphics. Now, as I mentioned, the symbol is saved with a graphic. And to edit any of these graphics, what you would use is your graphic select tool, which is a tool to the far left. On the second tool button row, it looks like this red arrow pointing to this square or rectangle area. If I click on that, and I can just, as I move my mouse over these graphics, I see that the mouse changes. And when I see it change, for instance, when it goes to the four arrows pointing north, south, east, west, that means if I can click on this particular graphic and drag to move it to a new location. Also, if I move my mouse within this and I move within one of these handles, I see that the mouse changes. So for instance, on the diagonal handle, I see that the mouse changes from an arrow pointing north, south, east, west, to a diagonal arrow. In this case, is pointing from northwest to southeast. allows me to click in that and drag, and I can actually scale this point symbol up to a larger size if I want it. Now to actually change the symbol on this, I can also just double click on the point to bring up the graphic properties dialog box. At this point, I see that I can edit several things here. I have the symbol that I can double click in this. Remember, I said that the symbol is saved with the individual graphic. It's not a legend, unlike a vector layer like a shapefile, but rather the symbol is saved with each individual graphic. So if I wanted a blue point instead of a red point, I could select that symbol. This just gives me the coordinate information of where the point is located at. I could type and enter new values for this if I wanted to. In addition, I could rotate this point symbol by certain degrees if I wanted to. For instance, I could rotate it 45 degrees. And then finally, if I wanted to scale this symbol, I could check scale, and what that would do is it would change the size of the symbol depending upon the scale of the map. So for instance, if I wanted the symbol to appear larger as I zoomed in to the map, or if I wanted the symbol to appear smaller as I zoomed out, I could scale the symbol and then just enter a reference scale to use to anchor that symbol size. And let's try it without it first, and then I'll show you the difference when we do scale it. So I'll click apply at this point, and before I leave, let me just mention there is one other field called graphic tag info. This can just be used as a description or identifier for the graphic that you could programmatically select graphics using this graphic tag information. That's a little bit more detailed than we'll get into in this tutorial, but I did just want to call attention to it. So I'll click apply. And as I can see, it did change the symbol. It also rotated it by 45 degrees. Now I have the blue arrow next to it. Now, as I mentioned, the scale factor, right now, none of these graphics are scaled. So as I zoom out, if I just pull back and zoom out, I see that the relative size of the graphic stays the same. So it doesn't really change. If I was to go back using my graphic select tool, I'm going to click on this blue point again, and I'm double click on it. And now let's say I want to scale the symbol. And by default, if it wasn't scaled before, it'll set the reference scale to whatever your current map view scale is. And so what that will do is if I click apply and accept this, now as I zoom in, you're going to see that this symbol size is increasing because I'm zooming in to a lower scale value than what the reference scale was set to versus the symbol that was not scaled. And then if I pull back and zoom out, it's going to be just the opposite. You're going to see the blue symbol point get smaller, again, because I'm zoomed out to a higher scale value than what the reference scale was set to, versus this red point symbol, which isn't being scaled. Now, I will also point out a couple of other features with the graphics as well. One of the features being some of these special graphics that we can add. And so one of those is if I go here to kind of this center area on the second tool button row and click the drop down arrow, is one is called add bubble text. And so if I click on this particular graphic feature, what this does is allow me to add callout text. So if there was a particular feature that I wanted to call special attention to with some type of annotation, I can click on that particular point, drag while I'm holding my mouse wheel down. So where I clicked at is where the leader will be, the start point of the leader. And then where I drag and release is where I will add the text box to annotate whatever it is that I'm trying to call out. So as I release that, I'll now get this new dialog, and I see I have an option here for the actual bubble itself. So I can change the symbol if I wanted to. I also have the symbol for the text itself, so I can also change this symbol as well. And then I can also choose to scale it if I wanted to. So let me go ahead and enter some text at this point. And I just hit my enter key to add a second line so I can add multi-line text. And then you can change the text alignment if you so desire. And now when you click apply, you see that I get this call out box with this text in it that's been added. Now when you edit this, like if I was to use the graphic select tool at this point and click on my call out box, the edit behaves a little bit different with this. So for instance, if I wanted to change this leader location, let's say I didn't want it pointing at this feature, I wanted to point at something up here, I can click at the tip of this call out feature. You see my cursor changes. If you notice, it's with the double arrows at this point. When I move it within this black box, it changes to the little finger pointer. And if I click and drag, you can see that I'm actually moving the leader location. And then I just release. Likewise, if I was to change, if I wanted to move the text box closer to the leader, I could just click on one of these handles, these little black handles, and move this text box up closer. Or I could just flip it around if I wanted to. I could use one of these handles and just pull it up and actually flip it around to point in this direction. So it is a little bit different editing with the text box versus, if I was to click on the polyline here, as I click this boxes, I'm just using it to stretch the line in either direction or whatever direction I want it to go in. And then the other feature I wanted to call out, this kind of a special graphic tool, is this dimension tool. So again, on the second tool button row, kind of near the end of the tool button row, there's a drop down box, and this is where it has all the measurement functions. And the other special graphic I wanted to call attention to is the add linear dimension. And so what this allows you to do is actually measure areas on your map. So if I click this tool, I can click on an empty space out here and measure an area if I wanted to. Just by clicking the start point of the length I'm wanting to measure, I click where I'm ending the measurement, and then I'm just pulling up or down where I want to place the actual dimension line. And you see that it adds that dimension. Now, the other thing you can do, if you actually wanted to measure a feature that's contained in a layer, for example, over here, you just make that layer your active layer. And then what that allows you to do, depending on what feature you're wanting to measure, as you're using this tool and you move over that feature, is snapping to the actual vertices so that you can measure specifically the area that you're wanting to measure. So for instance, if I wanted to measure the length of this road from this intersection to where this little off ramp begins, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little curved ramp that comes off there. I could do that by selecting the layer that contains the feature. So as you notice, I'm clicking on the layer here and it kind of highlights it. And then I'm using my dimension tool. And as I move over features in that layer, I get the snap box. And I just click once for the starting location, then I click again for the end of the measurement. And then I just pull up or down or whichever direction where I want to actually place the dimension line. And then I'll click and it adds the dimension. Now we'll say a couple of things on the dimension. And really for all the graphics, you can set a lot of the default behavior for your graphics from the view drop-down menu. So if you look at the top of the application, there is a view drop-down menu. If you click on that, the very first menu option is set view properties. And what this allows you to do is, one, it allows you to set the default symbols to use for any new graphics you're adding to your map. So for instance, you see here's the default symbol for the point symbol. Here's a default symbol for the line, text, polygon, dimension, the leader line, the dimension arrows, as well as the dimension text. And you can change any of this by simply double clicking on a particular symbol, bring up the symbol palette. So if I wanted the default point symbol to use a green marker instead of a red marker, I could select that. The polygon symbol, again, is used for all polygons that you might draw as simple graphics on your map. But in addition, that's the default symbol also used for your callout text bubble. And then the other thing I wanted to point to is you can set your default measurement unit. So if you notice when I added the dimension, it measured it in meters, and that's because my measure units was set to default to meters. I could change this to feet, miles, kilometers, just depending on what units of measurement you're wanting to use. So for example, if I selected feet and click apply, now if I was to go and add another dimension, let's say from this intersection point to this one, I now see that the measurement is done in feet. The other thing with the dimensions I should point out too is if you try and edit the dimension, much like the other text, you can use your graphic select tool and click on the dimension. If you were to try and drag it, so you can drag it down and what have you, but you also, as you notice, it's expanding and changing the length of the line. As you click and release, it's actually going to also change your measurement value here. So that's just something to be aware of. So as you drag it and move it, if you're extending the length of the line, it will update the text in the dimension as well. And if you double click on your dimension, you see that the graphic properties dialog box looks a little bit different. So now you have a leader line that you can edit. If I wanted to double click on that and change that to a blue line or maybe a blue dash line. And by default, when you change the color of the leader line, it changes the color of your arrow. And then you also have a couple of different arrow options that you can choose from here if you wanted a different arrow than what you had. In that case, it did change the color back to black as well for the arrow. Same thing with the text, which is what's used to indicate the length in the dimension. And you can change that font as well and symbol and click apply, and then it would change it here on the map. So that concludes the tutorial. Hopefully this gave a good overview of using the graphics in your map. Again, just want to reiterate, the graphics are useful for annotation on the map, calling attention to certain features. Would not use graphics to do analysis or something like that. I think you'd be much better served using vector layers or using the layers for that type of analysis. But graphics are very useful, and hopefully this gave a good overview of using the graphics in the Simple GIS Client application.